Hey everybody, I am Choke. I am a PHP developer and have been for the last 15 to 20 years. I am the owner and founder of chokehub.com, which is a new website aimed at the creation and delivery of open source applications, as well as helping to teach the next generation of developers through online video tutorials. And I figured what better way to announce chokehub.com than to create the first of hopefully many video tutorials for the website. And so I began thinking about my life as a developer, where I started, where I'm at now, and all the things that I've learned that it really takes to become a great developer. And what is the first thing that a person needs to be a great developer? They need a great development environment. And so that's what this video is all about, how to set up what I think is a great development environment. So I took my laptop that I use every day and cleared the hard drive to reinstall Ubuntu on it in order to make this video for you. Now we're looking at the desktop here. Only things I've done so far is to install the screen recording software and the video editing software. Now, if you know anything about servers, you probably know that most of the world's web servers run on some flavor of Linux. And I am of the belief that it only makes sense to develop applications using an environment similar to what your production environment will be. I run Ubuntu on all of my production servers, and as such I also run it in my development environment with nearly identical configurations. And doing that ultimately helps when I move from development to production, and that I don't have to worry about version differences of a dependency or subtle nuances between operating systems. So let's take a quick look at a few things that a developer really needs when developing web applications. And the first thing you need is an HTTP server. This would be Apache, Nginx, IIS, or one of the many others that are out there. Number two, you need PHP. I recommend 5.4 or later, with test-driven development being heavily adopted at this point. The third thing you need is a PHP test suite. There's a lot of those out there as well. 4, you need a database. MySQL is heavy with PHP, but PostgreSQL, NoSQL, DBase, ODBC, Mongo, etc. That list goes on. Fifth thing that you need to think about is version control. The two big ones are Subversion and Git. And the sixth thing that you need is a good IDE. NetBeans, Notepad++, PHP Storm, Genie, or any of the thousands of other IDEs that are out there. Try to stay away from the WYSIWYG editors, or what you see is what you get, such as FrontPage or Dreamweaver. There is a list of that is just a list of some of the basic necessities to do any real development. Now, all of these things can be installed on any operating system. So while I'm using Linux, use what's most comfortable for you. Okay? Now, Ubuntu comes with two ways to install from repositories. The first way is using the Ubuntu Software Center, which is right here. Okay, I use this for very few things. I actually prefer the second method, and so I'm going to close this because we won't use that in here. The second way is using the terminal. Now, Ubuntu comes pre-packaged with the command apt-get, which is a package manager, and it works. But there is an alternate one that you can install, which personally I think does have better dependency management. So let's go ahead and get that installed now. If we press Ctrl-Alt-T, a terminal window like this will pop up. In here, we type sudo apt-get install aptitude. Now, let me explain what this line is doing. The word sudo is basically me telling the Linux kernel that, hey, I know I'm on an account that's not root, but I need temporary root permissions. And this will only work if the user that is issuing the command is a part of the group sudo. Otherwise it will be denied. Apt-get, I'm calling the package manager. I need to install some software, and the software that I want to install is called Aptitude. So press enter. It asks for my user password. So type that in and wait for Aptitude to install. Now Aptitude is great in that if you need to install something but your machine is missing a dependency or has a newer or older version of a specific dependency than is allowed, it'll let you know and give you the ability to fix it. And so now we have Aptitude installed and we can really begin to get started. So we pressed Control-Alt-T to open this terminal window. And this terminal is great and all, but I think there has to be a way to speed up the use of terminal so that as a developer I can focus more of my time on actually writing code instead of switching between windows. Now luckily someone has drawn off the inspiration of the game Quake, and they've written a nice terminal named Quake for use on Ubuntu. Now that's what I use. So let's go ahead and get that installed now. We can do that by sudo aptitude install Quake. I want to continue, yes. Okay, so now we have Quake installed. We can close this terminal as we're no longer going to need it. The rest of the tutorial we will be using Quake. So let's go ahead and open Quake now. If we click right here, and this is basically your start menu if you're familiar with Windows. And so in this search box up here, we'll just type Quake. And you'll notice that we have Quake Preferences and Quake Terminal under Applications here. Let's just go ahead and click on the Quake Terminal icon. And over here, you should see Quake is now running. Press F12 to use it. And so with that, Quake is running, it's installed, and all we have to do to pull up the terminal is press F12. Now, pressing F12 again will hide it, but it never really goes away and you never lose your place, and so that's great. Now let's start our environment installation by installing some dependencies that we will need later on in the tutorial. So let's press F12 to bring up the terminal window, and we will type sudo aptitude install, and we want to install curl zlib1g-dev. We want to install build essential libssl dev lib readline dev lib yaml dev lib sqlite3 dev sqlite3 lib xml2 dev lib xslt1 dev lib curl4 openssl dev python software properties python pip and python dev. Press enter. It'll ask for our password. And yes, I want to get all of this. And this might take a minute to install, so I am going to pause the video until it completes. Okay, so now we have all the dependencies that we will need for this tutorial installed. Now, even though this is not a production server, I still like to install some software to monitor what is going on. Now, we could use applications such as Top or Free or VMstat or a culmination of many others. Or we can use application packages, and there are a lot of those, like CLion, Nagios, Munin, Zabbix, or Glances. For my production servers, I tend to purchase and install Nagios. It's not cheap, but it's definitely worth the price. Now, for a development environment, I tend to install Glances instead. It's free, still gives me all the information that I need or want out of a monitoring system. And so let's go ahead and get that installed right now. So we already have the terminal open, so let's just sudo su into root to make things a little easier. And we'll type pip install glances with a capital G. It'll download the file and install it. And now we need to do pip install pi sensors. Okay, and so both of those are installed. Now pip is a Python package index. It's a dependency management, or an application management rather, system. So now we have both glances and Python sensors installed. We can now launch glances simply by typing glances in the terminal. Now, the first thing you're going to notice when looking at this is all the colors. It's different than the others that you just saw. And so what do these colors mean? Now, green means you're good to go. Blue, such as my processor was just a second ago, means you should probably really watch that. Violet, such as the nice level of my pulse audio for my laptop, is an alert. And red, such as this temp 1 down here, is critical. So that is something that you really need to look at and see where the problem is. My laptop is cold to the touch everywhere, so I'm not sure what could be 6,280 degrees Celsius. We can exit this to get back to the terminal by typing Control-C. Now, one of the things that we will need for many systems on Linux is Java. We can type Java and we can install any one of these here, but we're not going to. I don't like any of those. I tend to use Oracle Java myself, and so we can install that as follows. We do sudo add. We're in root actually, so we don't need the sudo, so it's just add apt repository ppa web update team Java. Press enter, and that installs the keyring. And now sudo aptitude update. You notice that even in root I tend to do sudo. It just gets to be habit. And so we do an aptitude update every time we install a new repository. And that's so that we can bring into our file, our local file system, the names of all the packages and locations that are in all of the repositories we have access to. And so as you can see, we have 7 new packages that we can install just by adding that single repository. And so let's do aptitude install Oracle Java 7 installer. It'll bring up this here, hit spacebar on this arrow button to the left and spacebar, and it will begin to install Java. Now this usually takes a while, so I'm going to pause the video until it's completed. Okay, so our Java has just completed, and we can test to see if it was successful just by typing Java. If we get the help window, then we are good to go. And with that, we're almost done with the boring stuff. So let's exit out of our root account and go back to our normal user account. The next item to look at is version control. Now I use Git, and as such we will install that, and we'll use it to get some other software as well. If you use Subversion, I do still recommend installing Git. So we will do sudo aptitude install Git. Yes, I want to continue. Okay, so now Git is installed. What we need to do now is just do a little bit of configuration for it. And so we will do git config global color.ui auto git config global user.name choke git config global user.email choke at chokehub.com. Okay, so now that's the boring stuff out of the way. Let's discuss a few of the things that we need now in order to really get started with development. So we know that we need some sort of HTTP server. So being that I'm using Linux, I have two options really, and that's Apache or Nginx. Now there are pros and cons to both, but I prefer Nginx as it has a lighter footprint, which causes it to run faster, take up less memory, and performance is better. All at the expense of being just a little more difficult to configure when it comes to virtual hosts. So before we install Nginx though, let's first get Ruby and Rails installed. Now even if you aren't a Ruby developer or have any interest in being a Ruby developer, there are a lot of systems that you can use that are written on it, so I do recommend installing it. Okay, so let's go git clone github.com ssstevenson rbenv.git, and we want to install that in our .rbenv. So that will clone into that, and now we get to have some awesome command line fun here. So echo export path equals home.rbenv bin path what this line basically does, the echo command, anything that's inside this single quotes will be automatically added to the end of whatever file that you specify at the end. In this case, .bashrc that is in our root directory for our user. Okay, now echo eval .bashrc and exec shell. Okay, so now let's clear this. Now we need to install Ruby build. So git clone github.com stevenson ruby build.git, and we want to install that in plugins Ruby build. And now another echo command, export path equals home rbenv plugins Ruby build bin path, and add that to the bash rc file. Now let's get that in. Now we just have two more things to clone, and we will be able to get Ruby installed. So git clone github.com Stevenson arbenv gem rehash.git. We want to install this in arbenv plugins arbenv gem rehash. Okay, now git clone https github.com Stevenson arbenv default gems.git, and we want to install this in plugins arbenv default gems. Okay, now we do echo bundler and add that to arbenv default gems. Okay, now the last step on this before we install Ruby is to tell Ruby gems not to install documentation for each package locally. So no rdoc. Actually, we do no ri, no rdoc, and we want to add that to the .gemrc file. Okay, and so now we should be able to do arbenv install 2.1.2 to install Ruby 2.1.2. And this usually takes a while, so I'm going to pause the video again. Okay, so now we have our Ruby installed. We can do arbenv global 2.1.2 gem install bundler and arbenv rehash. And now if we do ruby v, we can see that we're running 2.1.2. okay, now since Rails ships with so many dependencies these days, we're going to need to install a JavaScript runtime like Node.js. This lets us use CoffeeScript and the asset pipeline in Rails. So to do that, let's do sudo add apt repository ppa chris lee node.js. It'll ask for the password. Press enter. Sudo aptitude update. And this portion may take a little while. It just depends on how large your repository list is. Mine isn't super large at this point, so it doesn't take too long. And now sudo aptitude install node.js. I do want to continue. Okay, and so we are good to go on that. And now without further ado, we can actually install Rails. So we do gem install Rails. And this usually takes a minute, so I'm going to pause the video yet again. Okay, so now Rails is installed. We can do arbenv rehash one more time. And we can now see that we're running Rails 4.1.5. So we have our Ruby and our Rails installed, and we can actually continue with our HTTP server, in this case Nginx. Now we could just run sudo aptitude install Nginx and be done with it, but I know that for me, where I am actually interested in learning Ruby and Ruby on Rails. I'll run my Rails through Nginx with Passenger like I have my production server set up. So in order to do that, the first is to get a key. So let's ask for the key from the keyserver, keyserver.ubuntu.com, and we want to receive the keys for 561 F9 B9 CAC 40 B2 F7. Press enter, and we have one imported. Next we do sudo aptitude install apt transport https ca certificates. Now, I didn't have to install anything. That's because I'm on 14.04 of Ubuntu. Anything before that, you may have to install those. It's always good to try to install them, just so that you know you have them. So now we do sudo su into root. We do echo deb https oss binaries.phusionpassenger.com apt-passenger trusty main, and we want to add that to apt sources.list.d passenger.list, and now we need to chown that to root, and chmod it to 600. And now we can do aptitude update. And we have 14 new packages that we can install. So let's install Nginx full and passenger. Install Nginx full and passenger. Yes, I want to continue. Okay, and we are good. And so we have our Nginx installed. We have the ability to run Ruby and Ruby on Rails applications. In order to pipe a Rails application through Nginx, however, we need to modify the configuration file for Nginx. So we're already en route. Let's go cd etc Nginx and pull up the nginx.configuration file. We want to scroll down until we see the passenger root. And we want to modify this line here to go home choke dot rbenv versions 2.1.2 bin Ruby. Control O, Control X, and then sudo service nginx restart. Now, let's go ahead and add our local user to a group that was just created by installing Nginx, and that is the www-data group. And so we can do user mod a capital G www-data choke. And now if we type groups choke, we will see right here that I am now a part of the www data group. So with that, let's start working on the rest of the local server, shall we? Now, since the dominant database for use with PHP is MySQL, let's go ahead and get started installing that. So let's do aptitude install MySQL server so that we actually have a local server, MySQL client so that we can issue MySQL commands from the command line, and lib MySQL client dev just to enhance upon that. So select a password. Okay, and now we have a functioning MySQL server. Okay, so at this point, the only thing that we are missing from having a fully functional local server is PHP. Now, in the old days, we used to just install PHP and have it run within Apache. If you restarted Apache, you also restarted PHP. Nowadays, however, it's increasingly more popular to run PHP on a Unix socket as its own service. So let's go ahead and get that set up now. So sudo add apt repository ppa entree j php5. Press enter. Sudo aptitude update. Okay, now we do sudo aptitude install php5-fpm. Okay, so now we have PHP installed. Let's install some of the PHP extensions that, for me, I know I'll be needing for development. So aptitude install php5-cli, just in case that didn't get installed. php5 intl, php5 gd, php5 curl. Okay, so once all those are installed, we can actually test our environment with a simple info.php file. So let's go ahead and do that now, but we still need to edit our PHP configuration as well, or our Nginx configuration. So since we're already sitting here in the Nginx folder, let's just go cd to sites available. And you'll see that we have a default. So let's pull the default up here and scroll all the way to the bottom. The thing with Nginx is PHP is not automatically included. You literally have to specify that you want to be able to serve a PHP file, which is great when you're combining PHP and Ruby on Rails through Nginx. We installed PHP with FPM, and so we're running on a Unix socket, and so just uncomment those lines that I did, Control O to write it and Control X to save it, and then sudo service nginx restart. Okay, and now we can actually go to cd user share nginx HTML, and we can touch an info.php to just create an empty file and nano that same file. And if we've done this correctly, we can now go to localhost and see the welcome screen, but we can also go to info.php and see the PHP 5.5 info file. And so we have done it correctly. We've gotten all the responses that we wanted to from this server. So let's go ahead and minimize this because we will use it again later on. Now, the last thing for our PHP environment is a PHP testing suite, and we're going to install PHP unit. So let's just do aptitude install PHP unit. Since we're already in root, I don't need to use sudo. Okay, so once that completes, we can test the installation success just by typing PHP unit. If we get this help screen that comes up, then we have installed correctly. Now we need a way to manage our databases. Now some IDEs have programming that allows you to do this internally within the IDE. However, PHP-MyAdmin is still a great tool to have. And so we can install this by typing sudo aptitude install php-myadmin. If you're running Apache, hit the space bar and then arrow over to OK. We're not running Apache, so I'm not going to have any stars here. We're just going to go straight to OK. Do I want to configure a database? Yes. Let's create the password. And go. Okay, so now we have PHP-MyAdmin installed, but we still need to add a location that we can access that from the browser. And so being that we're using Nginx, let's just modify our default site configuration. And the way we do that is location PHP myadmin. Root user share index.php, index.html, and then index.htm. Location PHP myadmin dot plus escape that dot try files URI equals 404 fast CGI pass Unix var run PHP5 fpm dot sock fast CGI index is index.php include fast CGI params, and we want to set fast CGI param script file name to document root fast CGI script name. And we're almost done with this modification here. Next, we add one for all the images and other assets. JS, ICO, HTML, XML, and TXT. And for this, all we do is root user share. Okay, now the first thing, let's make sure everything is escaped by a semicolon. Just like PHP, it will throw an error. So semicolon, 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 semicolon. This doesn't need one because this is actually the end of that line. And a semicolon there. So Control O, Control X, and sudo service nginx restart. F12, and now if we've done this correctly, which we hope we have, we should be able to go to PHP myadmin. Now, every now and then you will get a problem like this, okay? It's no big deal. First, what we need to do is figure out what we're having issues with. Let's change this appearance, transparency down a little bit. So we do tel-f var log nginx error.log. Okay, so actually don't see any issues here. Usually what the issue is a permissions issue. And so if we do sudo chown :www data var lib php myadmin star.php and sudo chmod g+wr var lib php myadmin star.php, and then we do sudo chown www data php myadmin config-db.php and sudo chmod g+wr var php myadmin config-db.php. And then we also do sudo r chown www data var lib php5 sudo chown wdata var lib php5 and sudo chmod r g+wr to var lib php5, and then sudo service php5 fpm restart and sudo service nginx restart. Okay, so what those permissions are doing is just giving the www data group access to read and write. And so now in Firefox, if we kill everything, clear your recent history, everything, get rid of literally everything and clear, and then close it and bring it all back up, we should get to this, and now we can do root and log in just fine. And so if you run into issues like that, that's how to fix it. Okay, now the next step, and we're almost done here, the next step is Composer. Composer is increasingly popular, and it's just killed other PHP package managers that have come along. So let's go ahead and quickly install Composer globally. So I usually exit out of root on that, and I'll do curl. Let's clear the terminal here. Curl -s and then capital S, https getcomposer.org/installer, and pipe that through PHP. So all our settings are correct for using Composer, and it's downloading. This usually only takes a quick minute or two. Okay, and so now if we look, we have a composer.far file. Okay, and so what I will do is I will sudo copy composer.far to user local bin composer.var. Now I will also sudo move composer.var to user local bin composer. You notice, so now I have two files there. I have composer.var, which I can run from any folder, but I can also do composer. You could do a symlink instead, but it's really no big deal to do it this way. I usually just run composer anyway, but periodically I find myself actually typing the .var, so I tend to just run both. Now we're armed with composer. We're ready to install all sorts of packages such as Symfony to create endless amounts of amazing web applications. Packages.org has listings of all available packages that you can use to Composer to install. For the IDE of our environment, we can install pretty much anything that we want. I personally use PHP Storm and RubyMine, so I've purchased copies of those, and I'll install those later. If you like NetBeans, Notepad++, Genie, or anything else, you can install those. From here, our possibilities are endless. So please be sure to like and subscribe to the ChokeHub channel to continue getting video tutorials. Check out chokehub.com. We're on Facebook at ChokeHub, and you can find us on the Freenode Irk server at ChokeHub. So thank you for watching and enjoy your development.